How's it going, everyone? I'm Andrew Jensen, your friendly neighborhood realtor, and for today's video, I thought because it's getting close to Halloween and it's the spooky season, we should talk about something that might seem sort of superficial, but it's actually something that could have a big implication on the sale of a home. And that is whether or not you need to disclose if you believe your home to be haunted. So it might not sound like much, but it actually might have a big impact. So we're gonna dig into the logistics of this a little bit. So let's get started. So the first thing to talk about is what actually does need to be disclosed when it comes to the sale of a home, because there are certain things that qualify as material latent defects, and those are things that the seller has to disclose to potential buyers. Mostly because those things have a significant impact on the value of the home, and they wouldn't be easily discovered from just like an inspection on the outside. It's something that if there was flooding in the basement, but it's been covered up by drywall, so you don't see that flooding damage. Permits, that can be another one that comes into play when it comes to a material latent defect that needs to be disclosed. Another example would be like if your home was a fentanyl operation or there was a drug operation going on there, that's something that you would need to disclose as well, because it might not be something that you immediately can see on just sort of an inspection of the home, but it could have an impact on the value, pretty significant impact actually, and on the health of the people there, right? So those would be considered material latent defects. Defects in the home that wouldn't be easily discoverable by just a standard inspection, but something that would impact the value of the home. So the big question is, do you have to disclose if your home is haunted to potential buyers? Well, this actually became a big issue about 30 years ago in upstate New York. The Ockley family had this very kind of old school Victorian looking house, and they were putting it up for sale. And now what had happened was, Helen Ockley, she had told everybody that her house is haunted. It was actually part of like the ghost tours around the city. Her house was one of the places that the van or the bus, whatever, would stop. And so she had told people that the beds would shake. They had seen the apparition of some kind of like a military person, like a lieutenant, kind of in the doorway of the basement. So clearly that this had a bit of a notoriety in the city as the haunted house. And so all of a sudden, here comes this guy, Mr. Stambovsky. And the funny thing is that pretty much everybody in the city knew that this home was haunted, except for Mr. Stambovsky. So he came in, purchased the home for about $650,000, which in 1989, that's quite a bit of money. So he buys the house, and then later on, some neighbor obviously comes up to him and says, "Hey, by the way, your home is haunted. How's that going for you?" And he had no idea. So the very first thing he did was he took the Ockleys to court. And the judge actually immediately threw out the case. Because in real estate, we have what's called caveat emptor, which basically just means that it's buyer beware. You should have done your due diligence, you should have looked into what's going on with the property. So it's on the buyer to do that. The seller didn't have to tell you it was haunted. And so that got thrown out, but in the appeals court, it actually got brought back in. And what I wanted to do is I'm gonna read to you basically what the appeals court judge said when it came to his decision, because it actually got turned around. And so all of a sudden, Helen Ockley, the original owner of the house, had to give the money back to Mr. Stambovsky because the house was legally haunted. So let me just read to you what they said. They said, whether the source of the spectral apparitions seen by the defendant seller are parapsychic or psychogenic, having reported their presence in both a national publication, so Helen, the original owner of the house, had made it very clear that like, hey, we are a haunted house, come and see us on the haunted house tour. She'd even like submitted these things to Reader's Digest and the local newspaper a couple of times. The defendant, so this is Helen, the defendant is stopped, so they can't go back on their word, to deny their existence, talking about the haunting and the publications that she had put out there. As a matter of law, the house is haunted. So that's kind of crazy, right? So like legally, this is a haunted house now. And so what had happened was now Helen, who originally owned the house, she now has two houses. She had sold that house, got the money for that, bought a new house, but now she had to give the money back from the original sale of her house back to Mr. Stembovsky because the home was legally haunted, basically. And what that means is that that home has kind of like a stigma on it. We have a phrase in real estate when you have a property that has a stigma on it, and that might impact the value of the house because people might not want to move into a house if they know that it's got this notoriety as a haunted house. So in that case, it turns out that by not disclosing that the home was haunted, it ended up being a really big legal hassle for the original owner and for Mr. Stembovsky. He didn't get to move into his house because he didn't want to move into a haunted house. So the actual way that we work with haunted houses or things that we need to disclose of this nature in Alberta is technically we don't need to disclose it. It actually, and I went and talked to the real estate board here in Alberta and here in Edmonton, and they told me that technically we don't need to disclose that. But, and this is a big but, and so if you're a buyer out there, this is for you. You have to disclose it as a seller. You'd have to disclose things like that if there's a death in the house or if it's haunted, if the buyer asks you. So you can't be dishonest. If a buyer asks you directly, is the home haunted? You have to tell them, yes, it's haunted, or no, or whatever your response is, right? Whether it is or not. So there you go. That's kind of how it works. So short answer, do you have to disclose if your home is haunted? No. But you probably should, especially if they ask you, then yeah. So there actually might be a bit of a silver lining. If you're a buyer out there, there might be a silver lining to buying a haunted house, a supposed haunted house. First of all, you're probably not gonna have as much competition looking at that house. If it is like one of those like very obviously haunted houses, that might drive away a lot of buyers who are just looking for a nice place to have a kid, have a dog, and relax. They might not wanna have to deal with a purported haunted house. The next thing is you probably will be able to get a little bit better of a deal, right? You might be able to negotiate a bit better on a sale of a haunted house. Mostly, again, just because there wouldn't be quite as much interest, or again, if there's that stigma on the property, maybe something really bad happened on the grounds and that's sort of what sprang the rumors that it was haunted. And then the last thing would be if you're kind of into that sort of thing, right? Like, I personally love Halloween. I've got the decorations up in here. I totally am into Halloween. It's a crazy little holiday, but I love it. Can't get enough of it. I don't know why. Has been like that way since I was a kid. So if I was searching for a home and I found the perfect home, perfect location, and it turns out it's haunted, not a big deal for me. It might be for my wife, but we don't know. I haven't crossed that bridge yet with her anyways. But for you, if you're into that sort of spooky Halloween-y thing, maybe you want to be featured on one of those ghost tours that go around the city, maybe buying a haunted house would be the right thing for you. So there you go. That's just a little bit of a rundown of whether or not you actually need to disclose to a potential buyer whether or not your house is haunted or not. Again, short answer, you don't. But the long answer is you probably should, just so you don't run into the same kind of issue that the Ackleys and the Stembovskys had when it came to the transaction of that property. So there you go, everyone. I hope you have the best Halloween ever. I hope that this sort of spooky real estate video was fun to watch, and I will catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Stop, look, and listen. It's Halloween. There's witches with broomsticks and big black hats, stirring up the potions in big black vats. Come on, stop, look, and listen. It's Halloween.